Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Dusty Sonnenberg, field leader with Ohio's Country Journal and the Ohio AgNet. You are joining us this morning on the Ohio AgNet podcast. And I've got a all-star lineup with us today. Typically, you just see Matt and I, but we've got Matt Reese, editor of Ohio's Country Journal. Also with us, Joe Everett. And Joe is one of our sales marketing specialists and special guest on today, one that humbles all of us probably, Greg Peterson, more commonly known as Machinery Pete in the social media and ag world. And Greg, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, guys.
Well, a lot of things going on in the ag industry. Of course, a big one, Matt and I are going to be heading down to Commodity Classic here. Probably what, Matt, I'm taking off on Wednesday morning. When do you head down to Orlando?
Wednesday afternoons when I'm going down.
All right. Greg, do you have a chance to get down to Commodity Classic, or are you going to be hanging around the Heartland?
No, I'll be down there the first day of the show on Thursday, spending the day there. So looking forward to it. Commodity Classic's always a great show, a lot of good quality conversations. So looking forward to it.
Now, I got a question for you. If people stop by at Commodity Classic and they see you, they're going to be awestruck because you're, Machinery Pete, you're a big deal. What do they call you? What do they call you for short? Machinery, Mac, Greg? What do you go by? What's your moniker for short?
Well, it's probably about 60% Pete, 40% Greg. But I did have someone ask me at the Louisville Farm Show about this was pre-pandemic, but we got to the Q&A part after my seminar, and a lady raised her hand and she said, "Why did your mom name you Machinery?" No, but whatever.
That's a good question.
It's I love those conversations at the farm shows. People, it's always fun to stop and visit, and I always, frankly, come away with a bunch of stories. People telling me about a tractor they have back home or a neighbor. So that's always probably the best part of going to the farm shows.
Well, Greg, if you can, before we get started, maybe give us a little bit of background. How did you get to where you're at today?
Well, I'm kind of an old shoe here, but a little over 33 years ago, I started. I was 23 years old, and my wife and I had just got married, and she was fortunate to get a teaching job in her hometown of Rochester, Minnesota. And I was an accountant by trade, had a job in the Twin Cities, and always been a numbers guy at heart. And so we moved to Rochester, and I was looking for work. And right in that little 1 month window, my dad, Jerry, who's a third generation farm equipment dealer in my hometown of Benson, Minnesota, Dad called me up and he said, "Hey, why don't you come home? There's something I want to show you." And there was a banker down the road in Morris, Minnesota, that had started a little book where he was compiling auction prices. The bank had need for their internal purposes in the 80s for hard cash valuation on equipment, because of course, in the 80s it was a different time. And but anyway, as a dealer, my dad got a hold of this book and really liked it. It's hard to remember, but of course, no internet then, no cell phones. So the flow of information was, it was Stone Age compared to today. So the banker was going to fold up this little business. He got a promotion and he didn't have time to mess with it. He only had 100 subscribers at like $14.95 a year. So it was just kind of a little thing. But I was 23 and my dad showed me this book and he said, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "Well, it looks really interesting, compiling auction prices." And he said, "You're 23. He said, "You're very independent. I know you." I said, "I think there's something here." And so I just listened to my dad and took off. And it took a long time to get mass with it, but I was always encouraged by, and still am, whenever I go out to auctions now, and a key piece of machinery sells, or even a not key piece of machinery, post hole digger, whatever, there's always somebody with a pen and a little piece of scratch paper, and they write down what it brought, and they'll stuff it in their pocket because they want to know a year from now what that thing bring. And that's what I do. And so that's 33 years of compiling big data, like 25 years before anybody said big data. And then it just grew over the years. Obviously the TV part of it, I didn't train for any of that. I just kind of go with the flow. And then the website has evolved. Now we have, of course, 100 and some thousand pieces for sale. So we're a marketplace to buy and sell along with the auction pricing. So it's just been a really, really fun ride these last 3+ decades.
Wow, that's a great story. Well, Matt, we're going to get into a lot more stories from Greg, but before we go into the rest of the podcast, why don't you share some of the other things we've got coming up?
Well, first off, Joel Penorwood went over to Clark County for Wilmington College's 65th annual Aggies Judging Contest. And what a great event that is. There were 1,500 young people there judging general livestock, equine, and dairy at this event, and agronomy. And it's just a great learning experience for those young people. It's a great learning experience for the students at Wilmington College who plan it too. And so we've got a couple interviews with Joel and some folks from the Wilmington Aggies Judging Contest that took place last week. And in addition to that, so this is kind of a funny story. I live right around the corner from Dave Brandt. I don't know, Greg, if you know Dave Brandt or not. He's well known around the country and internationally for his work with no-till and cover crops. And years ago, the USDA NRCS kicked off an event at his farm highlighting soil health. That was back in 2012, and somebody took a picture of Dave. And then a couple years later, they wrote a blog looking back at the history of this series with soil health they were talking about, and posted a picture of Dave Brandt. That picture got picked up by some guy that makes up memes. Are you familiar with memes, Greg?
I am familiar. I have not got into the world of making memes myself yet, or TikTok, but yes, I know of memes.
So Dave is a meme. They use this picture of Dave and they put "it ain't much, but it's honest work" underneath it. And it is global. It's international. Dave didn't even know what a meme was until he went into the bank one day and the teller said, "You're a meme." And he said, "Pardon, what's a meme?" And she pulled up her phone and showed him. And now Dave Brandt is internationally known not only for no-till and cover crops, but also for being this meme that he didn't know he was. And so his face has ended up on original paintings and T-shirts and hats and even mini skirts. There's a mini skirt out there where you can buy it for $37.50. It's got Dave Brandt's face on it, and it says "it ain't much, but it's honest work." I saw it and I ran home right away and told my wife my Mother's Day shopping was done, Greg. I've got this figured out, and we're going to go get these Dave Brandt skirts. So I have an interview with Dave Brandt talking about the meme that he didn't know he was, and now he gets stopped on the street whenever he's in a city. People asking for the meme. It's a lot of fun. So we've got that audio coming up in the podcast here next, and that's going to be available at ocj.com. and out on Facebook, and lots of fun stuff in there. In addition to that, next week, we've got farmer Jeff Dooling from Putnam County, who will be talking about the Conservation Tillage Conference and his work with no-till and cover crops. So we've got all kinds of good stuff in the podcast today and coming up next week as well with Jeff Dooling. So be sure to check that out. And we got much more coming up with Machinery Pete, and you can call him Machinery or Greg or Pete or whatever you want. But lots more good stuff from Greg coming up next in the Ohio AgNet podcast.